Hey friends, it's Ray Keating. I'm a novelist. I've written mysteries, thrillers, historical fiction. I want to talk to you about my new book that's coming out at the end of August. Release date August 28th. Menace, an Agent Dean Cold novel. You can pre-order now. Let me say that right up front. You can pre-order the Kindle edition over at Amazon.com. You can pre-order signed books at RayKeatingBooksAndMore.com. So I hope you'll do that. Why should you do that, though? Again, as I've said, I've written mysteries and thrillers. I've written 19 Pastor Stephen Grant thrillers and mysteries. There are more coming there if you're a Pastor Stephen Grant fan. I thoroughly enjoy writing those. I always wanted to write historical fiction, so that gave birth to the Alliance of St. Michael novels. There are two of those so far. Again, more coming. Cathedral and Subversion. Set in the early 1930s. The Alliance of St. Michael, a group of Christians working together to counter the great evils of that time as best they can in terms of communism and fascism. But science fiction has always been a big part of my life from since I was a kid, being a fan of Star Trek, and I'm going to talk more about Star Trek in a moment, to this very day where, I read science fiction. I watch science fiction movies, streaming shows, television. Love the old stuff, love the new stuff. So I've always wanted to dip my toe, if you will, into science fiction. And I finally came up with the idea that said, okay, let's do this. I convinced myself, if you will. So Menace, an Agent Dean Cold novel, will be the first, hopefully in a lengthy series. And it is set in 1953. Agent Dean Cold works for the Secret Service. And the Cold War is about to change dramatically, and Dean Cold, is going to be at the center of that. So what's fun here is I've kind of brought all sorts of aspects of my writing experience into the mix here. I brought in the mystery thriller aspects. I brought in actually historical fiction because it's set in 1953, and there are some real characters that play big roles. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Joseph Stalin, just to name the main two. The setting is rooted, at least at that point, at the start of it, in the historical moment of early 1953. There are influences that come into play in terms of what I'm trying to do here with this novel. First off, of course, I want to tell a rip-roaring story, and hopefully I do. But there are influences here. So you've got one of my favorite, I've mentioned this to people before, one of my favorite novelists, one of formative writers for me in terms of getting into fiction was Tom Clancy. So the Tom Clancy-esque aspect is in play here. Also, I love old science fiction movies. So there's the influence of 1950s science fiction movies on this story. And by the way, I'm working on a collection of essays. It'll be a short collection looking at some 12 classics of the 1950s sci-fi era. So hopefully that will be done soon and out the door. So that comes into play. My interest in history and the Cold War certainly is in the mix. Also, there are theological aspects that come into the story, hopefully quite naturally. So there's the influence of C.S. Lewis. Not so much, interestingly, on his fiction end of things, but some essays that he wrote about this related to the topic that undergirds Menace. So all of those things have come into play. And the fact that I was kind of able to pull those all together into a story that fits the way I write, I think it works well. Hopefully it does. So you're going to go on a journey with Dean Cold. You're going to come across Dwight D. Eisenhower. You're going to come across Joseph Stalin. You're going to have to... Cold, under the orders of Dwight Eisenhower, has to bring together a group of people to unravel a rather bizarre mystery. And the consequences are significant and widespread. It'll challenge, politics, war, faith, perhaps the foundations of Western civilization itself. So they're all mixed in there. But again, hopefully I'm writing a story that's interesting, exciting, that has good characters, dialogue that works. Always a stickler for me in terms of some of the books that I read, and I kind of roll my eyes, and hopefully there's no rolling of the eyes on the part of the reader here in this book or in my other books. So hopefully it all works together well. The early reviews have been nice. I've gotten some preliminary advanced reviews, got 4 stars from Self-Publishing Review. A couple of early readers have said great things about it. So I'm very excited. I hope that you will come along with me on this journey. There's one other thing I want to mention before I let you go. I wrote an essay at the end of this book, author afterward, and it's entitled Why Science Fiction. It's a little bit of what I've talked about here, but I mentioned I was going to say something about Star Trek. There's one episode of listen, I'm a big Star Trek fan, the original series, most of the stuff that's followed, not all of it. And there are some classic great science fiction episodes, great storytelling in that original series that still, they hold up today. They were made in the 60s and they hold up today. I love some of the classic episodes, City on the Edge of Forever, Balance of Terror, the Doomsday Machine, Amok Time. You see my Star Trek nerddom coming out here. But there's one that, as I grew older, I found fascinating, and that's the episode Bread and Circuses. And that episode actually had an influence on my interest in this topic that Menace is about, right? Perhaps, it's no secret in terms of the cover. Aliens from outer space. If so, what kind of impact would they have on people's thinking, outlook on life, but also on faith and so on? So all these things are integrated into this story. And the classic, I hope you get the book. I want you to read the essay, obviously, after you read the novel. You could read the essay first. It's up to you. But the close of that episode of Bread and Circuses, there's a fascinating discussion on the bridge, how they usually, wrapped up many of the episodes. And I'm not going to spoil that, but I quoted the dialogue, and that at a point in my life, I said, that would be interesting. Isn't that fascinating that they did that in a sci-fi show? And that had an influence on me very much doing this book and this story. As I mentioned, there are other things that came into play. C.S. Lewis, he wrote a couple of essays, one called The Seeing Eye, and another was, let me look it up here real quick, Religion and Rocketry. C.S. Lewis always had an impact on me in a whole host of areas, and these 2 essays were really interesting. There are also a couple of books, and I mentioned those in this essay, so you can check those out as well. But again, I think this is going to be a fun read, a great ride. I think you'll love many of the characters, and hopefully, as I said, this will be an ongoing series. I certainly enjoyed writing it. That's always a key, right? There are things over the years, I've written a lot of different areas, and when you don't like writing something, it doesn't come out very well. I've learned that. Luckily, on the fiction front, I've enjoyed all the books that I've written. It's a process. I've enjoyed the process, and that very much includes Menace, an Agent Dean Cole novel. So please, check it out. Pre-order. That would be fantastic. Go to Amazon.com, pre-order the Kindle edition, or go to Ray Keating Books and More and pre-order the signed book. Release date is August 28th. Very excited about that. Please check it out. Thanks so much for listening. God bless.